So the next thing we're going to look at is soldering. Now there's some really good videos on the internet about how to solder. In fact, that's basically how I learned to solder, was looking at videos on YouTube. And so what we're going to have to, soldering is just like melting metal together, I guess, or connecting metal together with melty metal. Not sure that makes sense, but still, yeah, idea for connecting stuff together. So we've got our motor shield, for example, and I want to connect my motor shield to my motor. Now you see, this is, I want to basically connect this bit into the other side of the motor here. Now I'm going to do that by using this kind of wire here. Later as well, I'm going to try and add some pins onto the board itself. I'll do that in the next video. So I've got this wire, I've cut it to a reasonable length. You need to work out roughly what you're going to be doing with it, how much you need. It's always better to cut a bit longer and then cut it down later than to not have enough. Okay, so if you need to, if in doubt, do a bit more, assuming money is not a big issue wire-wise. Okay, now the first thing I want to do is strip the wire. So I'm going to basically use my wire cutters. Now I'd say, depending if you know what you're doing or not, in my case I don't, I'm going to start with the biggest size, and you'll notice that doesn't do anything. So I'm going to move down one. And there on the 2.0 I feel a bite. Okay, so you can feel there's a bit of tension there. And so if I try and pull that up, you see that it nicely removes the plastic coating of the wire, leaving the actual wires there. And now that I know that I'm doing 2.0, I can apply that to all of the other parts as well. I'm going to do it on both sides. Now, when you look at the wire, you'll kind of see that it is a sort of, it's not actually like a single wire. It's actually these kind of like fibers, wire fibers. Yeah, you can see that there. So what we want to do is we want to twist those together just to make sure that they're going to stay together. And I'm going to do the same with the other one. Now, in theory, not in theory, in reality, I can actually just use it as is and plug that into my, and plug that directly into whatever I want to. But you'll notice the more you do that, the more kind of frayed the ends get, and it can get really annoying. Sometimes you end up with just like one thread hanging off over the side. So what we're going to try and do is basically melt some solder onto the top of these so that they're a bit firmer and so that they stay together. I think this is called galvanizing. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but basically we're going to galvanize our wires so that they stay as a solid wire rather than as a bunch of fibers individually. Now to do that, we're going to need our soldering iron. We're going to need some flux paste, depending on the type of thing you got, and we're going to need some solder wire. Now, I'm using the thin solder wire. You could probably try the thicker one and see how it goes. Now, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of the solder paste, or sorry, some of the flux paste, and I'm basically just going to add it to the end of my wires. It doesn't have to be anything, it doesn't have to go anywhere specific about it, just to go in the actual wire itself, but like it doesn't have to be like super uniform or perfect. Just add a bit of flux paste onto the end, and that's going to help our solder get to where it wants to go a bit easier. Alright, maybe don't want it on the plastic, but there we go. Okay, then I'm going to get my soldering iron and I'm going to start heating the wires. As a general rule, I do not need to heat the, oh, see my solder's got the solder flux stuff's going there. As a general rule, you heat the area you want it to go to rather than heating the solder wire itself. Okay, so the solder wire should be getting applied externally to it. Once it gets hot enough, that wire is going to allow it to melt or galvanize, supposedly we said, onto the wire itself. So now this may take a wee bit of time for it to get warmed up. And there, it's starting to go. Okay, so now it's starting to see, you see the solder starting to go onto the wire, and it's just kind of melting onto it and making it into is effectively a nice single wire, and that's going to make it easier to plug into our motor shield later. Now let's do the same with the other one as well. Okay, get that flux all going. There we go, it's a nice flux. And we want to be heating it up. There we go, it's starting to go already. You can see that solder going onto it and turning it into a nice kind of single metally thingy. Okay, so that's just an example of how we could galvanize our wires, and then it'll be easier for me to plug that in to the motor shield as well. Okay, so I'm going to do that 4 times for mine. And apologies with the lighting, I can't quite get the lighting right here, but hopefully you can kind of see it. There we go, it's maybe slightly better. So we're going to try and get that going onto the wires that way as well. Okay, and next video we'll look at how we attach our pins, and maybe attaching to the motor as well. Alright.